Today we're going to get to hear from three men from Springfield, Ohio, who can help us understand what do they wish we would have known? How do they wish we would have been introduced to the town of Springfield and the real challenges and the real opportunities that are happening there? So thank you all three for being here. Would you each mind briefly introducing yourself and saying where you work or what community you're affiliated with?
Good morning. My name is Vilés Dorsainvil. I am the Executive Director for the Haitian Community Help and Support Center in Springfield, Ohio. And that says something.
I am Vilés' pastor, and I'm the pastor of Central Christian Church.
My name is Brandon. I work for Nazarene Compassionate Ministries, which is part of the Nazarene denomination, and my wife pastors at our Home Road Nazarene Church in Springfield.
Thank you all so much for being here. Vilés, what do you wish the average American knew about Haiti before we get into Springfield locally?
I really wish, and thank you. I thank you for having me. And I really wish the average American knew that Haiti has a rich and a resilient history that is often overlooked. Haiti was the first nation in the Western Hemisphere to abolish slavery and establish a republic, achieving independence from France in 1804 through a successful slave revolt, an extraordinary accomplishment, actually. This independence, though, came at a high price, as the country was burdened with a massive indemnity imposed by France in exchange for recognition, which crippled the economy for decades. Haiti is also home to a vibrant culture deeply influenced by its African heritage, French colonial past, and indigenous Taino roots. Its art, music, and cuisine are celebrated globally, yet Haiti has faced persistent challenges, including political instability, natural disasters like the earthquake in 2010, and external interference that have complicated its development. So understanding Haiti's history and its ongoing struggle can provide a more nuanced perspective of the country beyond the stereotypes, helping to foster empathy and appreciation for its people's strength and resilience.
I'm just thinking, how much do we, as non-immigrant Americans, have to learn from a people who your freedom was so hard fought and you're still paying the unfair consequences of the freedom that you deserved from the jump. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm excited and eager to hear more about what Springfield has been like for you. But Pastor Carl, could you tell us, what do you wish the country knew about Springfield specifically?
I wish the country knew that the arrival of Haitians in our community was the best thing to happen in 50 years. We were a shrinking Rust Belt city. We were one of the fastest shrinking cities in America, and we became one of the fastest growing small cities when Haitians started to arrive. So that would be one thing. And the other is just that the church stood up, and within about 2 days of President Trump's comments, pastors were coming together to do a press conference saying that's not true. And it was wonderful to be a part of that and to see that. And
yeah, thank you so much. Vilés, what was happening in Springfield for you that we did not hear about if we were just tuning in to the national news?
Yeah, and this is a very good question. I think that, to me, it's the frontline workers, the police officers who are so professional. When they come across an accident, they have that kind of way of calming people down out of the way they are furious. And the school teachers, out of the professionalism, trying and the expertise trying to make every kid feel welcome. So this is a very good thing. And the nurses at the hospital, even though they encounter immigrants that they don't speak the language, but with the heart they have to serve, trying to find a way just to answer questions and accompany the immigrants in the hospital. People might believe this is an easy thing to do, but when you encounter a person from another culture and giving that person service while you don't speak the language, but still you keep your demeanor, you are wise enough just to walk in the person's shoes and to serve it, this is a thing that should make the headline, but unfortunately the focus was on other things.
This is going off script a little bit, but you mentioned the teachers, and that made me thinking about the children in Springfield. Do you serve a lot of Haitian children in your ministry, and what have the last few months been like for those kids?
I think that shifting from a culture to another one, they're adjusting themselves. And the responsibility that we have is to work with the parents to help them better integrate the community. And also we had like a very big Christmas party for them and just to make them feel welcome. And work with local organizations, work with kids and to educate them on the Haitian cultures, how they have to work with those kids and how to accompany them as they are looking their new identity and a new culture. So our responsibility as an organization is doing what we can to make sure that those kids find their identity in vast American culture.
I'm just so encouraged to just think of you all supporting those kids and welcoming those kids through what I just am sure was a very unstable time amidst an already unstable time of being immigrants and adapting to a new culture. So thank you for all the work you're doing. Brandon, could you tell us a little bit about how your kind of faith community has been impacted by relationships with Haitian immigrants or other immigrants in Springfield?
Yeah, sure. Well, I wanted to mention just first off, too, there's a friend of mine named Michael out here, and his wife is Marjorie, who does so much work in the Haitian community in Springfield. I know the two of you know her, and you would be much better served for her to be up here instead of me. So I wanted to mention that. I'm sorry that Marjorie is not with you today. It was interesting hearing Vilés answer that question about how, we're serving children and how are children being impacted, and then how are they impacting others. It reminded me of when my son, who's 14 now, was still in elementary school, and he had a friend named Maratson. And at the time, of course, Haiti and immigrants in Springfield weren't in the news in quite the same way as they were this last fall, but we knew there were many Haitians moving into Springfield, and my son had this friend named Maratson in his class. And I think it was 5th grade, and I remember we were looking at his grades online, and in one of his classes, his grades were like really low compared to his other. And so we asked him, and then we contacted the teacher, and she wrote back and said, "Oh, don't worry about it," because I think he was flunking. And she said, "Don't worry about his grade. We have a Haitian in the class who doesn't speak English very well, and Gabe refuses to do his work and sits with Maratson and helps him translate his own lessons so that he can be doing his work." And I told him, I was like, that's the best way you could ever get out of homework. Please keep doing that. He has tried other ways since then. I had it was really great to hear from Pastor Nathan and Pastor Caleb this morning. A couple of the things that each of you said really resonated with me. And so as a way of answering your question, I wanted to mention 2 things. I had a conversation. So the Nazarene church that I'm a part of, it is exactly what you think of when you would hear conservative evangelical church in the U.S. All the good things about that, all of the often rough things about that. And I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a member of our congregation who I would describe as a very conservative member of our congregation, politically, religiously, very conservative member. And I was having this conversation with him about Haitian immigrants in Springfield. And he was an example of a person, if we want to talk about people having multitudes and sitting in the tension of discomfort and not feeling like you have to choose one emotion or even one viewpoint over another. He was talking very clearly saying, I don't think that they should be here on the TPS program. I don't think the TPS program should exist. Now, we can disagree there. We do disagree there. But the way in which he spoke about the congregation members that have been with us for 6 months exemplified the image of God and honoring and acknowledging the image of God. So he had this political disagreement. And it goes back to a phrase I use all the time in all of my work. Like, in the absence of all the right political solutions, we're still required to act morally. And he was this very good example of someone who I know is very conservative and yet wasn't allowing that to disciple him in his Christian walk and his view of who we had. And I think that's much of the church's task going forward, whether it's about Haitians or other immigrant groups or anyone in particular, is not allowing ourselves to be discipled by the social media, by political opinions, but rather by what God has asked us to do and be.
Oh, Britta, that is so good. It reminds me of, I'm not going to say it as well as Russell Moore said it, because I could never, but I remember him saying something like, we're supposed to love our neighbor and not ask, should they be my neighbor, before we do the action. And I think that's what you're speaking to. Will someone tell me what time it is? Oh, okay. Can I put you guys on the spot for a question I didn't write down? Okay, we know what the challenges in Springfield were not. We are pretty confident that the challenge facing Haitians and others in Springfield is not related to pets and people taking them. But what are the challenges, like, in the opportunities in Springfield that we can be praying for and serving alongside you if possible?
I mean, there's a new alliance coming together in Springfield called Springfield Neighbors United that is seeking to advocate for immigrants, to equip the church to respond, and also to provide direct aid. And that is something coming together very quickly. It didn't exist 3 weeks ago, but it's kind of taking off, and we appreciate everyone's prayers for that.
Absolutely. We'll be praying for that. Vilés, could you share something?
Yes, I think that the anxiety in the community is still there, because we are in a time of uncertainty because of that fragile status that folks have. They are concerned of what can happen next. And they're asking questions in terms of what to do. But our responsibility is to do training for them. And we have, like, the executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance, Mrs. Gail Joseph, and her organization and mine join together and do some training for folks, because I think that we can empower people through knowledge for them to know their rights. And if something happened that they encounter in ICE officers, how to behave themselves, they have the right to remain silent. And also we train them to develop plans, personal plans and family plans. And I know that Jackson was organized like a training on that by Pastor Carl's church, just for folks to know what to do and how the leaders, the local leaders, can stand in solidarity with those immigrants. So this is the way that local leaders, organizations, and churches have been working together to make sure that we are not God just to help them to get rid of the fear that they have, but we try to equip them in a way to know how to face the fear. And we have, like, mental health people, and some of the English class, after English class, they can come together and train them on how to behave themselves in times of uncertainty, or when they are facing fear and anxiety. So these are the work that we do, and I will ask you to keep praying for those immigrants in the Latinos community, the Haitians community, and the immigrants at large, because if I can experience that fear in Springfield, I cannot tell you how it is nationwide. So what you're doing here today is the best thing, to stay in solidarity with those folks, to let them know no matter what, there are God's people standing with them. So this is what I can say.
Yes. And I think we'll talk a little bit about how we can practically do those things, but I think these are really important things for us to be praying for. Brandon.
Yeah, is it okay? Can I mention a challenge for the church in supporting Haitians in Springfield?
Yes.
I really appreciated what Pastor Caleb said earlier about if you look around your congregation and there are not immigrant voices in charge, that's a problem, right? And I think often, most of my professional work is sort of in the development world, and very often we have this Western paternalistic mindset where we think we know what's best for the people who are in need, and that's simply not the case. We are not creating enough space within our churches to listen to and elevate the voice of those who are actually in need, and not just those in need, but want to flourish and want to organize them for themselves the life that they want. And so I think that is a big challenge for our church. And when Pastor Caleb was speaking earlier, it reminded me, and I want to share with you one very specific example that maybe you can actually take to your churches about one way that you can do this. We have two pastors in our denomination, Marcos Canales and Jennifer Guerra. They live out on the West Coast. I invited them to a workshop years ago. And during that workshop, they were talking about the multi-ethnic, multi-generational church, multi-immigrant population that they were a part of. And they said, we recognize in our congregation there are different levels of power. Some people in the community have more power than others. Within our denomination, within our congregation, they have more power than others. And so every week they had a communion service at tables. They gathered people at tables, this powerful place that Jesus utilized all the time. And they had communion together. But during that communion time, they specifically paired people together that they knew had different levels of power in the congregation and in the community. And they specifically, in the process of communion, asked them to explore and discuss how their different levels of power affect them on a daily basis in their relationship to the community. So if the church in Springfield or elsewhere is to respond well to the needs in their community of immigrant voices or others, it has to begin with the dismantling of the power that those of us hold and are unwilling to give up.
I think you gave everyone some good homework, pastors in the room, or for us to go talk to our pastors. It's beautiful. Dr. Carl, could you tell us a bit, before we close with some practical things, like what is your prayer and hope for the American church at large in light of everything your community has experienced?
I'm going to get there.
I'll hold you to it.
I had a ton of media exposure when this first happened as a result of an AP story. And I anticipated lots of hate mail and tons of nasty emails. And what I experienced instead was this huge groundswell of support from people who said, this is what I want the church to be. So we have not lost people. We've actually gained people because we've gone out on this limb. I think it's an opportunity to rediscover what the gospel is. And what I hope comes out of this is a fresh understanding of how central advocating for justice and caring for immigrants is to the gospel. And I think the world is hungry for that. And I think that when we do that, to me, I don't separate evangelism from advocacy for immigration. I think it's the same thing. And a lot of the people who have started coming are people who had left the church 20 years ago and hadn't darkened the door since then. And they're coming back. And I think of several examples where people came down the aisle for communion with tears in their eyes because they had not been there for so long, who came back because they saw the unity between us and our Haitian friends.
It's beautiful. That is so beautiful. Before we close, and again, I'm going to put volunteer. Are you all, you're sticking around the rest of the day? So we can feel free to strike up conversations with anything you wish I would have asked and I did not have time to. But I think we all kind of know we're looking ahead at this really uncertain time. It is very likely that people who are in the United States receiving temporary protected status could lose it soon or at some point in the next 4 years, which I think is a sobering thought and a worry for most of us in this room. How can even if we are not in Springfield, how can we come alongside our immigrant neighbors during this time? And what, like, kind of what's your best tip for each of us in the room? And I'll ask that to all of you.
Mine is very brief. I'll just spend every bit of social capital you've earned. Those of us who work in communities, who are often there, we have relationships, we have resources in the community, spend every bit of it. You might get it back, you might not, but don't save it up for some other time. This is the time now to spend it and to use it. I think that the next 4 years, I'm not a pessimist, I'm actually a very hopeful person, but hope is really only hope when it's hard, when it actually seems impossible. That's when it's hope. And I think the next 4 years are going to be a time where the church has to be very hopeful, and we have to spend everything we've collected during this time.
Yeah, I've been experiencing two things since last fall. I've been experiencing that way in America where bigotry or xenophobia is still there. And this is what happened to Springfield. But at the same time, I've been experiencing the beauty of America through people driving miles away just to step by and see how the community is doing. We've been receiving very huge support. People composing songs to send to us and cards and I believe that I am still hoping and optimistic in the good faith of how God used those people. And as my faith leads me to understand that in the time of chaos, God can bring order. So we do not know what will happen, but my faith tells me that what makes America America is the people God calls to stand with the most vulnerable. And the best thing for the way bad things can happen is when the good people do not do anything. So you're on the right path here. Even this event is the beginning of something, and praying and acting is the best way forward. So our reporters told me that it was like a wishful thinking to be optimistic about the upcoming administration, but I believe in my heart that God is all powerful. So this is my hope. Yep.
Amen. Final thought for us, Pastor Carl.
I want to give some credit to our community leaders. I don't consider myself a Republican. Most of the community leaders in Springfield are, and they did an amazing job. So it broke down some of the partisanship. They went out on a limb. They spent a lot of their political capital. There were cases where there were death threats against their children, threats to rape their wives, and they stood strong for the most part. And it just reminded me of the potential to work locally during this next 4 years, and there may be more opportunities to really have influence at that level than at a national level. One other sport, like our church printed up these little cards that said, Jesus loves you and so do we, in Creole. And we went to places where Haitians were shopping and just handed them out. And one teenager took the card and just started weeping. We just took him in our arms and prayed with him. But there's another guy who took the card and he walked away, and then he turned around and he walked back. And he said, I just want you to know the vast majority of people in Springfield are very good